The autumn wind whispered through the pines surrounding Cedar Ridge Cemetery, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and fading leaves. It was a place where time seemed to pause, where weathered stones stood like silent sentinels over forgotten stories. On this crisp October afternoon, 8-year-old Harper Lane clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from the roadside, her sneakers crunching softly on the gravel path. Her pigtails bounced as she walked, but her eyes, wide and shadowed by a grief too heavy for her small frame, fixed on the fresh mound of dirt ahead. It had been 3 months since her mother, Dana, was laid to rest here, taken too soon in a crash that the police called an accident, but whispered about in hushed tones. Harper didn't understand the details, only the ache that bloomed in her chest every time she visited. Today, though, something felt different. A low rumble echoed from the distance, growing into a thunderous growl that made the ground vibrate beneath her feet. Harper froze as a lone motorcycle crested the hill, its chrome gleaming under the slanted sunlight. The rider was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and clad in weathered leather, his face half hidden by a bandana and a pair of aviator sunglasses. He killed the engine with a final sputter, the silence rushing back like a held breath. Dismounting with a creak of boots on gravel, he pulled a single white lily from his saddlebag, pure and stark against the black of his vest. Embroidered with the faded insignia of the Red Valley Riders, Harper watched from behind a crooked oak, her heart pounding. This wasn't the first time. Twice before, on the anniversary of that fateful night 8 years ago. No, wait, her mum's death was recent. But this man, he'd been coming here every year on the same date, long before the fresh grave. Who was he? Not family, not a friend her grandma mentioned, just a stranger on a bike, paying respects to a woman Harper had never seen him with. The man, Elias Knox Rourke, though Harper didn't know his name yet, stood motionless before the headstone, his gloved hands clasped in front. The wind tugged at his greying hair, streaked from years under the sun and scarred by roads less travelled. At 41, Knox carried the weight of the Red Valley Riders on his back, a club of rough-edged men bound by codes older than the highways they rode. They were mechanics, haulers, guardians of the forgotten stretches between towns, loyal to a fault, but Knox was the quiet one, the enforcer who spoke with actions, not words. His visits here were his secret, a ritual born from a debt he could never repay. The lily trembled in his grip as he knelt, placing it gently at the base of the stone, etched with Dana Lane's name. "Another year," he murmured to the wind, his voice gravelly, laced with regret. "I keep my word, Dana. Always." Harper's curiosity overpowered her shyness. She stepped out from the tree, her flowers wilting slightly in her fist. The biker, Knox, didn't hear her at first, lost in whatever ghosts haunted him. But when her small voice cut through the quiet, he turned sharply, his sunglasses slipping down to reveal eyes like storm clouds, etched with lines of old pain. "Mister," Harper said, tilting her head, "why do you come here every year? You're not family. Grandma says only family visits graves like this." Knox's breath caught. A rare crack in his armored facade. He removed his sunglasses fully, folding them into his vest pocket, and studied the girl. She had Dana's eyes, clear, unyielding, the kind that saw through lies. For a moment the cemetery faded, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a crow, all blurred as memories flooded back. 8 years ago, Knox had been a different man, or trying to be. Fresh out of a stint in the service, he'd taken up as a mechanic in a dusty garage on the edge of Red Valley, fixing rigs for anyone with cash. But the wrong crowd found him, a local kingpin named Harlan Voss, who ran shipments that skirted the law, smuggled goods, debts collected in shadows. Knox told himself it was just work, just survival. One night, Voss's crew rolled in with a beat-up sedan, bullet holes pocking the fender, tires screaming for repair. "Fix it quick," Voss had growled, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. "We got heat on our tail." Knox had worked through the night, hands black with grease, the acrid smell of oil and gunpowder thick in the air. He didn't ask questions, never did back then. By dawn, the car purred like new, and Voss's men peeled out into the fog-shrouded roads, evading the sirens that wailed in pursuit. What Knox learned later, pieced from radio reports and bar whispers, shattered him. The chase ended in a fiery wreck on a rain-slick curve. Dana Lane, a young nurse driving home from a late shift, had been caught in the crossfire. A wrong turn, a panicked swerve. Her car spun out, plummeting into the ravine below. Voss walked away unscathed, his operation intact, while Dana's life ended in twisted metal and silence. Knox never pulled a trigger, never laid a hand on her, but he'd oiled the wheels that led to her grave. Guilt had rooted deep, twisting like the vines over the cemetery fence. Now, facing Harper, Knox swallowed hard, the taste of dust in his mouth. He knelt to her level, the leather of his knees creaking against the soil, close enough for her to smell the faint leather polish and road-worn exhaust on him. "What's your name, kid?" he asked softly, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "Harper," she replied, unfazed by his sighs. "This is my mum's grave. Dana. You knew her?" Knox nodded slowly, the white lily catching a ray of sun, glowing like a fragile beacon. "Yeah, in a way. I come here because I owe her. More than words can fix." He paused, the weight of unspoken truths pressing on his chest. The club brothers would call him soft for this, but secrets had a way of cracking open at the worst or best times. Harper's question hung between them, innocent yet piercing, and in that moment, Knox felt the first thread of a promise unraveling, not just to Dana, but to this girl who carried her echo. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the stones, Knox glanced toward the cemetery gate. His bike waited, a faithful steed, but riding away felt impossible now. Harper's gaze held him, demanding more than silence. Little did he know, this encounter would ripple through the Red Valley riders like a shockwave, forcing old wounds to the surface and binding fates in ways none could foresee. The promise he'd kept alone for years was about to become a vow for all. Harper tilted her head, her small fingers twisting the stems of her wildflowers until petals drifted like confetti onto the grave. The air between them thickened, heavy with the scent of turned soil and the faint metallic tang of Knox's bike cooling in the distance. His knees pressed into the damp earth, grounding him as if the ground itself might swallow his words before they escaped. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his mind, alone on long rides, the highway blurring into a ribbon of regret. But never like this. Never to the living echo of the woman he'd failed. "I owe her because, a long time ago, I made a choice that hurt people," Knox said, his voice low, like the rumble of thunder retreating. He glanced at the headstone, the carved letters of Dana Lane catching the fading light. Beloved daughter, devoted mother, gone too soon at 29. 8 years. It felt like yesterday and a lifetime. The kind that etched lines into a man's soul. Harper was just a baby then, swaddled in a crib while the world outside shattered. Knox had pieced it together later from newspaper clippings yellowed with time and whispers in the garage that employed him. Dana, driving home from her nursing shift at the local clinic, her headlights cutting through the midnight rain. The sedan, the one he'd rebuilt with his own calloused hands, barreling through the intersection, pursued by flashing lights and the wail of sirens. A swerve, a collision, the screech of tires on wet asphalt giving way to silence. Dana's car had flipped, tumbling into the underbrush, while the fugitives vanished into the night. Harper's eyes, So like her mother's, sharp and searching, narrowed slightly. She wasn't afraid. Curiosity burned brighter in her than any child's wariness. What choice? Did you know my mum? Like from before? Knox hesitated, the leather of his gloves creaking as he flexed his fingers. The cemetery was emptying now, distant figures retreating like shadows, leaving only the two of them and the wind sifting through the pines. He could lie, mount his bike, and ride back to the Red Valley Riders clubhouse where the fire pit crackled and brothers shared nods instead of stories. But something in Harper's steady gaze pinned him, a reminder that promises weren't just kept in silence. I didn't know her, not really, but I knew the man who caused this. He swallowed, the words tasting like ash. His name was Harlan Voss, ran with a rough crowd, the kind that drags good people down. One night his crew brought me a car, shot up, smoking, said it needed fixing fast. I was young, stupid, thought it was just a job. By morning it was gone, and so was she. The girl's breath hitched, a small sound lost in the rustle of leaves. She dropped her bouquet, the colors vivid against the grey stone. You fixed the car, the one that hit her. Her voice trembled, not with accusation, but with the raw edge of understanding too soon for her years. Knox nodded, the motion heavy. Yeah, I didn't know what they were running from or to, but when I heard about the crash, about Dana, it hit me like a freight train. She was just going home, kid, to you. He reached out, then stopped, his hand hovering before dropping back to his side. The white lily lay between them, its petals unmarred, a fragile symbol of what he'd tried to preserve in memory. For 8 years he'd come here on this date, the anniversary of that rainy night, leaving the flower as a silent apology. And more, he'd watched from afar, ensuring Voss's shadows never crept toward Harper or her grandmother Judith. A quiet vigilance, paid in favors called in from the club, eyes on the streets, warnings whispered in dark alleys. The Red Valley Riders didn't ask why. Loyalty didn't need explanations. Harper stepped closer, her sneakers scuffing the dirt. Grandma says the police never caught the bad guys, that Mommy's accident was unsolved. She used the word carefully, like something borrowed from adult conversations overheard through thin walls. Were you bad too? The question landed like a punch to the gut, stealing Knox's air. He looked away, toward the horizon, where the sun bled orange into the sky, painting the pines in fire. Bad. He'd wrestled that label in the mirror every dawn since. Trading grease for guardianship, the club's patch a shield against the void inside. I was part of it, Harper. I helped the man who did this get away. Didn't pull the wheel or light the fuse, but my hands. They turned the key. His voice cracked, the first fracture in the wall he'd built. That broke me. Still does. This grave. It's the only place I can say sorry without the world yelling back. Tears welled in Harper's eyes, spilling over as she knelt beside him, her small hand brushing the lily. The touch was tentative, a bridge across the chasm of years. Do you think Mommy hears you? Knox's throat tightened. I hope so. And if she does, maybe she knows I try to make it right, every day. He stood slowly, joints protesting like old chains, offering her a hand up. She took it, her palm warm and trusting against his rough glove. Together they lingered a moment longer, the cemetery wrapping around them like a confessional. As they turned toward the gate, a figure approached from the gravel path, an older woman, silver hair pulled into a practical bun, her coat buttoned against the chill. Judith Lane, 63 and fierce as the desert wind, carried a thermos of tea and a weary resolve. She'd raised Harper these 8 years, piecing together a life from fragments, her own grief, a quiet fire that never dimmed. Spotting them, she quickened her pace, eyes narrowing at the biker. Harper, who's this? The girl looked up, wiping her cheeks. Grandma, it's the man who comes every year. He told me about Mommy. Judith froze, her face paling as recognition dawned. The lines around her mouth deepened, memories surfacing like ghosts from the fog. She'd seen Knox before, from afar. The lone rider at the grave, never lingering, never speaking. Hatred had simmered in her then, blaming this stranger for the shadows that haunted her family. But now, close up, with Harper's hand in his, something shifted. "You," she whispered, voice edged with steel. "Why now, after all this time?" Knox met her gaze, unflinching. "Because the truth's been waiting long enough, and this girl's owed it." The sun slipped below the trees, casting the trio in twilight's embrace. What began as a solitary ritual was fracturing, pulling threads toward the Red Valley Rider's fold. Knox felt the pull, the old promise evolving, not just his burden, but a call to the brothers who'd stand with him. Justice, long buried, stirred in the gathering dusk, promising redemption, not in isolation, but in the unbreakable bond of those chosen as kin. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The twilight deepened over Cedar Ridge Cemetery, the pines standing like dark sentinels against the bruised sky. Judith Lane's eyes, sharp as flint, bored into Knox, her grip tightening on the thermos until the metal groaned faintly. Harper stood between them, a small anchor in the gathering chill. Her hand still warm in Knox's gloved one. The air carried the earthy bite of impending rain, mingling with the faint exhaust lingering from his bike. Knox felt the weight of 3 pairs of eyes, Judith's accusatory, Harper's curious, and his own reflecting back the ghosts he'd buried here for years. "You think words fix this?" Judith's voice cut through the quiet, laced with the bitterness of 8 years' vigil. She'd pieced together fragments of that night from police reports that went cold too fast, from neighbors' whispers about a chase that claimed her daughter. Dana, vibrant and kind, reduced to a name on stone because some shadows slipped away on fixed wheels. Judith had raised Harper alone, shielding her from the uglier truths, telling stories of Dana's laughter instead of the screech of metal. Now this biker, rough-hewn, with a patch that spoke of a world she distrusted, stood here, claiming a piece of that pain. Knox released Harper's hand gently, stepping back to give the women space, though his boots rooted him to the spot. The white lily at the grave's base fluttered in a sudden gust, petals whispering against the soil. "No, ma'am, words don't fix it, never will, but keeping silent. That's what let it fester." He pulled a faded photo from his vest pocket, creased and worn, Dana's face smiling from a newspaper clipping, her nurse's scrubs crisp under clinic lights. He'd carried it like a talisman, a reminder sharper than any blade. "I was there that night, not at the crash, but close enough. Fixed the car they used to run. Harlan Voss's crew. Thought I was just doing a job, keeping my head down. But it cost her everything." Harper's breath came in shallow puffs, visible in the cooling air. She glanced between them, the wildflowers forgotten at her feet. "Grandma, he says sorry every year, with the flower, and he watched us, so the bad men wouldn't come." Judith's face softened fractionally, the lines of exhaustion etching deeper. She'd sensed a guardian shadow over the years, a car idling too long at their street corner, a stranger's nod at the market that warded off prying eyes. Voss's reach had lingered like smoke, threats veiled in everyday encounters, but they'd faded without explanation. Now, pieces aligned. This man, the Red Valley Rider's silent sentinel, watched us. "You mean, you've been meddling all this time?" Her tone wavered between gratitude and fury, the thermos trembling in her grasp. Knox nodded, the motion pulling at the scar along his jaw, a remnant from a brawl that taught him loyalty's cost. From afar, pulled strings with the club. "Voss thinks we're small-time haulers, but we see things. Kept his dogs off your trail. For Dana. For Harper." The words hung heavy, the cemetery's silence amplifying them like an echo in a canyon. He could smell the rain now, sharp and clean, promising to wash away the day's dust, but not the stains on his soul. Harper tugged at Judith's coat, her voice small but steady. "He didn't mean for it to happen, Grandma. He broke when it did." The girl's empathy, pure and unscarred, pierced Knox deeper than any judgment. In her, he saw Dana's legacy, not vengeance, but a quiet strength that demanded truth over comfort. Judith exhaled slowly, setting the thermos on a nearby bench with a soft clink. She studied Knox, the aviator sunglasses dangling from his pocket, catching the last glimmers of light. 8 years. You carried this alone. Why not come forward sooner? Fear, Knox admitted, the word foreign on his tongue. The Red Valley Riders prided themselves on unbreakable codes, but he'd hidden this fracture, fearing it would unravel the brotherhood. Brothers like Jack's, the wiry prospect with a laugh like gravel, or old-timer, who'd patched more wounds than he could count, they'd stood by him through bar fights and border runs, blind to this shadow. Voss has pull. Cops in his pocket, cases buried. I fixed that car on a receipt I kept. Proof, but useless alone, testifying. It'd drag everyone in. A distant rumble of thunder rolled in, the first fat drops pattering on the leaves overhead. Harper shivered, and Judith pulled her close, the trio forming a fragile circle amid the stones. "And now?" Judith pressed, her voice softening as rain traced cool lines down her cheek. What changes with the little girl asking questions? Knox looked at Harper, her pigtails dampening, eyes wide with a trust he didn't deserve, yet craved to earn. Everything. The club's my family, chosen, not blood. They deserve the truth. And Harper, she deserves justice, not just shadows. He knelt again, rain soaking his knees, and met the girl's gaze. "You okay with that, kid? Me telling my people?" Harper nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Yeah, make it right, for Mommy." The rain intensified, drumming on the gravel like impatient fingers, urging them toward resolution. Judith sighed, the sound lost in the downpour, and extended a hand, not in friendship, but in tentative alliance. "Go, but if you ride for us, you ride clean, no more secrets." Knox clasped her hand briefly, the contact brief but binding, like a pact sealed in storm. He rose, helping Harper to her feet, and they walked toward the gate together, the cemetery fading behind them in sheets of water. His bike waited, rain slicked and gleaming, a beast ready to carry him back to the clubhouse, where neon signs flickered against the night. The Red Valley Riders' Hall loomed in his mind, a weathered barn on the outskirts, alive with the clink of bottles and the low hum of stories shared over engine parts. By the time Knox roared into the compound, the storm had eased to a drizzle, mud churning under his tires. The clubhouse door swung open, spilling warm light and the scent of wood smoke and coffee. Jax leaned against a post, wiping grease from his hands, his easy grin fading at Knox's expression. "Boss, you look like you wrestled a ghost." Inside, the fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows on walls lined with club memorabilia, faded jackets, a mounted license plate from their first big run. Timer sat nursing a mug, his white beard framing a face mapped by decades. 5 brothers gathered, the air thick with the day's end, unaware of the reckoning about to unfold. Knox stripped off his wet vest, hanging it by the door with a heavy thud. Water dripped from his hair, pooling at his boots. "Brothers," he said, voice steady as the rain outside tapered off. "Got a story, one that's been riding shotgun with me too long. Involves a grave, a kid, and a debt we might all pay." Jax straightened, the others leaning in. The fires popped the only sound. Knox pulled the photo and the crumpled receipt from his pocket. Yellowed paper, stamped with his old garage logo, dated to that cursed night. 8 years back, I fixed a ride for Harlan Voss. Didn't know it till later, but that car led to a crash. Took a woman's life. Dana Lane. Left a girl without a mom. Murmurs rippled. Timer's eyes narrowing. Voss, that snake. Why keep it buried, Knox? Because it was mine to carry, Knox replied, the firelight dancing on the scar along his jaw. But tonight, her daughter asked why I leave a lily every year. Couldn't lie. And her grandma. She knows now, they need us, not for revenge, for truth. That receipt links Voss direct. We testify, we reopen it. Together. The room stilled, the weight of his words settling like the storm's aftermath. Jax cracked his knuckles, a spark of fire in his eyes. Club's got your back. Always. We ride for the forgotten. This girl's one of us now. Timer nodded slowly, raising his mug. To promises kept, and new ones made. Outside, the moon broke through clouds, silvering the puddles. Knox felt the fracture mend, not seamlessly but strong, forged in the heat of loyalty. The Red Valley riders stirred, engines humming in the distance, ready to chase justice through the night. But as Knox stared into the flames, doubt flickered. Voss wouldn't go quiet. Shadows had a way of striking back, and this vow would test them all. Harper's face lingered in his mind, a beacon pulling him forward. Into the unknown ride ahead. The fire in the clubhouse hearth snapped like brittle bones, casting erratic shadows across the scarred wooden table where the Red Valley riders gathered. Rain pattered against the tin roof, a steady rhythm that mirrored the pulse of resolve quickening in the room. Knox stood at the head, the crumpled receipt laid out like a map to buried sins, its faded ink accusing under the low-hanging bulb. Jax paced the edge of the circle, his boots thudding softly on the plank floor, while Timer leaned forward, elbows on knees, his calloused fingers tracing the photo of Dana Lane as if committing her face to memory. The air hung thick with the aroma of damp leather, black coffee brewing in the corner, and the faint, acrid bite of engine oil that clung to every man like a second skin. "Testifying ain't a Sunday ride," Jack said, breaking the hush, his voice rough as gravel under tires. He stopped, crossing his arms over his club patch, a crimson valley etched in thread, symbol of the land they claimed and the oaths they swore. Voss has eyes everywhere, cops, judges, even some of the truckers we haul for. We poke this bear, it bites back, hard. Knox met his gaze, the firelight hollowing his cheeks, accentuating the scar that pulled at his jaw like a perpetual grimace. 8 years of silence had armored him, but sharing the weight tonight cracked that shell, letting in the chill of vulnerability. He could still feel Harper's small hand in his, trusting and warm against the rain, and Judith's tentative clasp, a bridge he'd never expected. "I know the risks. Been riding them solo too long, but that girl's waiting. Harper. She looks at you with eyes that demand more than whispers in the dark." He tapped the receipt, the paper whispering under his finger. "This ties Voss to the garage that night. Timestamp, signature, mine. Mechanics like me don't forget details." We pair it with what the club's seen, his shipments, the payoffs, enough to crack the case wide open. Timer grunted, setting his mug down with a ceramic clink that echoed in the quiet. The old rider's beard caught the glow, silver threads weaving through white like highways at dusk. He'd patched Knox up after more than one scrape, stitching wounds both seen and unseen, and now his eyes held a father's knowing. "Loyalty's our chain, boy. Breaks one link we all drag. But this is the kind that forges us stronger. Dana Lane, she's kin now through you. We ride for her, for the kid. Quiet at first, scout the edges." The brothers nodded, a ripple of agreement passing like a shared breath. There were 7 in the core tonight. Jax, the hothead, Timer, the sage, young Rook with his quick hands and quicker doubts, and the others, Steady Hale, who handled the books, Mira, the lone woman in their ranks, a former dispatcher with an ear for secrets, and Grit, whose silence spoke volumes. They weren't outlaws in the Hollywood sense, no capers or glory, just men and women bound by the road's code, fixing what the world broke, standing for the overlooked. The clubhouse, a converted barn on the fringes of Red Valley, hummed with their energy. Tools scattered on workbenches, a half-assembled bike in the corner gleaming under fluorescent strips, posters of legendary runs peeling from the walls. Knox spread a worn map across the table, the paper crinkling like old leaves. Pins marked Voss's known haunts, a warehouse by the river, a dive bar where deals slithered in the smoke, the backroom of a trucking firm that funneled his dirty loads. We start small. Rook, you and Hale tail his next shipment tomorrow. Eyes only, no contact. Mira, dig into old logs. See if any of our hauls crossed his path back then. He paused, the rain intensifying outside, drumming like impatient fingers on the roof. And me. I go back to Judith and Harper. Get their side straight, build the story clean. Rook shifted, his lean frame tense, tattoos of coiled serpents shifting on his forearm. What if Voss gets wind? He's got a nose for trouble. Last year he leaned on that family up in Pine Hollow, threats over nothing. Kid ended up scared, silent. The room tensed, the fire popping sharply as if underscoring the warning. Knox's mind flashed to Harper's face in the cemetery twilight, tears mixing with rain, her question echoing. Do you think Mommy hears you? He clenched his fist, knuckles whitening. Then we shield them. Post watches on their street, discreet like we've done before. The club's our strength, chosen blood, thicker than the rest. It was a mantra they'd lived by, forged in late-night rides and shared losses. A brother lost to a rig crash, another to the bottle after war's ghosts. They mended with action, not pity. Mira spoke up, her voice calm amid the storm, fingers drumming a steady beat on the table's edge. She joined 3 years back, after her own redemption, leaving a desk job that choked her soul for the open road. I've got a contact in the clerk's office, unofficial, can pull the original file on Dana's crash without flags, but Knox. You sure about testifying? Voss's crew, they don't play fair. Signs of aggression, not just words. Knox's gaze drifted to the window, where moonlight fractured through the downpour. Silvering the puddles like shattered mirrors, he thought of the white lily, wilting now in the wet grave, a symbol of apologies too late. Sure as the road ahead, I broke once, won't again, this ends with truth, not more graves. The meeting stretched into the night, plans weaving like threads in a loom. Routes mapped, signals set, 2 flashes from a headlight for clear, 3 for trouble. Coffee refilled, the pot gurgling like a distant engine. By midnight, resolve solidified, the brothers clasping forearms in a circle, the fire dying to embers that mirrored their unyielding core. Knox stepped out last, the door creaking shut behind him. Rain slicking his hair as he straddled his bike. The engine roared to life, a beast awakening, headlights cutting the darkness like a promise. He rode slow through the storm-swept streets, water sheeting off his leathers, the scent of wet asphalt sharp in his nostrils. Red Valley's lights blurred past, neon signs flickering in diners, the hum of a late freight train echoing his thoughts. Doubt gnawed at the edges. Voss's web was vast, spun from years of greased palms and silenced tongues. One wrong move, and Harper's world could shatter anew. But as the cemetery loomed on the hill, a dark silhouette against the clearing sky, Knox felt the pull of family, not the one he'd failed, but the one rising to mend it. Pulling up to Judith's modest home on Elm Street, a porch-light glowed like a beacon, cutting the night's veil. The house was weathered clapboard, curtains drawn against the chill. A swing creaking empty on the veranda. Knox killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the drip of water from the eaves. He approached soft-footed, boots squelching in the mud, and knocked. 3 raps, deliberate. The door opened a crack, Judith's silhouette framed in the warm spill of lamplight. Her eyes, red-rimmed from worry or tears, softened at the sight of him. "You already." "Couldn't wait," Knox said, voice low. "The club's in, but I need your trust. Harper's asleep?" Judith nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The house smelled of chamomile tea and fresh linen, a sanctuary pieced from resilience. In the living room, photos lined the mantel. Dana laughing at a picnic, Harper as a toddler with chubby cheeks. "She's out cold." Told her stories till her eyes drooped. "What now?" Knox removed his gloves, laying them on the side table with a soft thud. "We gather what we can. Any letters, calls after the crash, anything that smelled off?" As Judith recounted fragments, veiled warnings from strangers, a car circling too often, Knox listened, the pieces slotting like gears in a long idle machine. Outside, the rain eased to a mist, stars piercing the clouds, hinting at dawn's approach. Justice wasn't a blaze, but a slow burn, fueled by loyalty's unbreaking flame. Yet in the quiet, Knox sensed shadows stirring, Voss's reach, testing the edges of their vow. If this story's touching your heart, hit that like button below. The first light of dawn crept over Red Valley like a hesitant thief, painting the rooftops in pale gold and chasing the last wisps of mist from the valleys. Knox sat at Judith's scarred oak table, a mug of strong tea steaming between his calloused hands, the herbal scent cutting through the faint mustiness of the old house. Judith paced the linoleum floor, her slippers whispering against the worn tiles, recounting the fragments she'd guarded like fragile relics. A hang-up call 2 weeks after the crash, the voice on the line heavy with menace before it clicked dead. A bouquet of wilted roses left on the porch, unsigned, thorns pricking her fingers as she tossed them into the trash. "Shadows," she murmured, pausing by the window where lace curtains filtered the rising sun. "Always just out of reach. I thought it was grief playing tricks." Knox nodded, jotting notes on a napkin with a stubby pencil from his pocket, the graphite scratching softly. The receipt from 8 years ago burned in his vest, a talisman now shared, but these new threads wove a tighter net. Harper's bedroom door stood ajar down the hall, the girl's soft breathing a rhythmic anchor in the quiet. He glanced that way, the weight of her trust settling deeper. Voss doesn't forget loose ends. If he's sniffing around again, it's because something's stirring him. Maybe words leaked. Outside, birdsong pierced the air, a stark contrast to the undercurrent of tension coiling in his gut. Judith stopped pacing, leaning against the counter where a loaf of bread cooled on a wire rack, its yeasty warmth a small comfort. Her eyes, shadowed by nights of vigilance, held a flicker of steel. "You bring this to light. You drag us all in. Harper's just starting to heal. School, friends." She laughs now, Knox. "Don't take that." He set the pencil down, the napkin crumpling under his palm. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking seconds like miles on an odometer. "I won't." The club's setting watches. Discreet. Mira's pulling files today. Rooks on the roads by noon. We build the case quiet, hand it to someone clean. No vigilante rides. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed. The Red Valley riders had danced on the edge of the law before, hauling for the overlooked, staring down corrupt haulers, but Voss was a viper, coiled in the underbelly of the county. One testimony could unravel everything, or light a fuse. A low rumble echoed from the street, growing into the familiar growl of engines. Knox tensed, rising to peer through the curtains. 2 bikes idled at the corner, silhouettes backlit by the sun. Jax and Hale, their leathers dark against the morning haze. Jax raised a gloved hand in salute, then gunned the throttle, vanishing around the bend. Reinforcements, without fanfare. Judith exhaled, her shoulders easing a fraction. "Your family," she said, the word tentative, testing its fit. "Yeah," Knox replied, voice gravelly from the night's scant sleep. "Chosen. Like yours." He gathered the napkin, folding it into his pocket, and stepped toward the door. The porch creaked under his boots as he paused, the air crisp with dew-kissed grass and the distant tang of pine. "I'll check in by evening. Keep the doors locked. If anything feels off—" A sharp cry shattered the calm. Harper from inside, her voice muffled but urgent. Knox spun, heart slamming, bursting through the door with Judith on his heels. The girl stood in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, a stuffed bear clutched to her chest. "Grandma, I heard voices. Is the man still here?" "No fear, just confusion," her pigtails tousled from dreams. Judith scooped her up, the motion fluid from years of practice. "Just talking, sweet, about making things right." Harper's gaze found Knox, lighting with recognition. She wriggled down, padding over in her nightgown, the floor cool under bare feet. "You came back," she said, tilting her head. "Like you promised, Mommy." Knox knelt, eye level. The scent of her shampoo, simple like apples, mingling with the house's warmth. "Yeah, kid. Promises stick." He ruffled her hair gently, the touch foreign, yet grounding, then stood as the moment stretched. Dawn's light spilled through the windows, gilding the photos on the mantel, Dana's smile a silent witness. By mid-morning, Knox was back at the clubhouse. The barn's doors yawning open to reveal a hive of activity. Engines hummed in the bays, the sharp clang of wrenches on metal punctuating the air, thick with oil and sweat. Mira hunched over a laptop at the workbench, her fingers flying across keys. The screen's glow illuminating stacks of yellowed manifests. "Got something?" she called as Knox entered, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "The crash report. Originals buried, but there's a discrepancy. The sedan described matches Voss's plate from back then, traced it to a chop shop 2 counties over. And get this, a witness statement that vanished. Nurse from Dana's clinic saw the chase start." Knox leaned in, the wooden bench rough under his elbows, coffee's bitter edge lingering on his tongue. "Pull it, every thread." Across the room, Rook tinkered with a chain drive, grease smearing his arms like war paint, while timer poured over the map, red lines snaking like veins toward Voss's warehouse. The club pulsed with purpose, a machine oiled by shared resolve, but Knox felt the tremor, eyes watching from the shadows. Jax burst through the side door, rain from an unexpected shower sluicing off his jacket, his face taut. Trouble. Hale spotted a tail on the way back. Black SUV tinted, circling our route. Voss's make. They're probing. The room stilled, tools clattering to silence. Knox's scar pulled tight as he clenched his jaw, the fire from last night reigniting in his chest. "Double the watches. No engagements. We move tonight. Hit the clerk's office after hours. Mira's contact. Get the files. Physical." Adrenaline surged, sharp as exhaust fumes, sharpening every sense, the creak of leather as brothers shifted, the low buzz of anticipation. As the sun climbed higher, burning off the clouds, Knox rode solo toward the county line, the highway unspooling like a promise under his tires. Wind whipped his face, carrying the clean bite of wet earth and freedom's illusion. Harper's question echoed. "You came back," fueling him against the gathering storm. Voss's web tightened, but the riders were no flies. They were the wind that scattered silk. Yet in the rear view, a shadow flickered, a vehicle too sleek for these roads, hinting at the retaliation brewing. Justice demanded sacrifice, and Knox knew the cost was rising 1 mile at a time. The warehouse loomed on the outskirts by dusk, a hulking shadow against the fiery sky, its corrugated walls scarred by years of neglect and illicit purpose. Knox parked his bike in a thicket of scrub, the engine's dying cough swallowed by the evening's hush. Crickets chirped in erratic chorus, the air heavy with the river's muddy breath and the faint chemical tang of whatever Voss stored within. He waited, pulse steady as Jax's signal flashed, 2 headlight blinks from the ridge, clear. Slipping through the chain-link fence, Knox moved like a ghost, boots silent on the gravel, the weight of a concealed recorder pressing against his ribs. The plan was reconnaissance only. Eyes and ears, no fists, but instinct prickled. The scar on his jaw throbbing in warning. Dim lights flickered from cracked windows, voices murmuring inside, low and edged with suspicion. He edged closer, peering through a rusted panel. Voss held court at a makeshift table, his frame gaunt under a threadbare suit, flanked by two heavies whose bulks strained against denim. "That biker crew's nosing around old business," Voss rasped, a cigarette dangling from thin lips. Smoke curling like venom. "Rourke's name came up. Dig it. If he's stirring graves, bury him with them." Knox's blood iced, the words landing like gravel in his throat. They knew, or suspected. He backed away, heart hammering, but a twig snapped underfoot, sharp as a gunshot in the quiet. Footsteps crunched, one of the heavies rounding the corner, eyes gleaming in the twilight. Knox bolted. Legs pumping, the fence rattling as he vaulted it. Engines roared to life behind him, tires spitting dirt. Jax and Rook materialized from the shadows, bikes thundering, forming a barrier of chrome and loyalty. Knox mounted up, the trio pealing out in a symphony of growls, headlights slicing the night. Bullets whined past, warnings not hits, but the chase ignited. Voss's SUV lumbering in pursuit. Its grille a snarling maw. They wove through back roads, the scent of scorched rubber and fear thick in the air, branches whipping at Knox's arms. Jax whooped ahead, leading them into a narrow pass where the river gleamed black. The SUV faltered, engine straining, then veered off, lights fading into the dark. Safe for now. Back at the clubhouse, breathless and alive, Knox slammed the door, the brothers converging. "They know!" he gasped, peeling off his gloves. Timer handed him a rag, the old man's nod grim. "But we got audio." Voss's voice, clear as day, ties him to the past. The fire crackled anew, casting resolve on their faces. Harper's face flashed in Knox's mind, her trust a shield against the encroaching night. The vow deepened, pulling them toward confrontation, where redemption waited, not in silence, but in the roar of engines united. Yet as stars wheeled overhead, Knox sensed the true test looming. Voss wouldn't strike blind. The shadows hungered, and the ride had only begun. The clubhouse air hung thick with the acrid bite of gunpowder residue and cooling engines. The night's chase still thrumming in Knox's veins like an unspent thunder. He slumped against the workbench, the wood rough under his palms, as Jax replayed the recorder's tinny audio on an old boombox. Voss's rasping voice slicing through the quiet. "Bury him with them." The words looped, a venomous echo that set teeth on edge. Timer paced the perimeter, his boots scuffing the sawdust floor, while Mira transcribed notes on a battered notepad, her pen scratching like claws on metal. The fire had died to glowing coals, casting elongated shadows that danced like wary sentinels across the walls, lined with club lore, faded route maps, a dented helmet from a brother's close call. "We got him!" Jack said, slamming a fist into his palm, the impact muffled but resonant. His eyes burned with the fire of the pursued, leather creaking as he shifted, voice print, threats, ties straight to the old crash if we link it right. No more dancing in shadows. Knox wiped sweat from his brow, the salt stinging the fresh scrape on his knuckles from the fence. The rear-view flicker of that SUV haunted him, a predator's glint in the dark, but the audio was gold, tangible proof that Voss's empire rested on bones like Dana's. 8 years of grease-stained regret coalesced here, in this barn that smelled of oil and unyielding brotherhood. "We take it to the feds. Clean channel, no local dirt. Mira's contact at the Clarks, get the files bundled. But first light, I ride to Judith. They need to know the heat's on." Timer stopped, his white beard catching the ember light, eyes wise with the miles of hard-won lessons. "And the girl? Harper's no rider, Knox. Pull her into this storm, and Voss'll smell blood." The weight settled heavier, Knox's scar pulling taut as he nodded. Harper's innocent question from the cemetery, "Do you think Mommy hears you?" Replayed. a tether pulling him from the abyss. The Red Valley Riders were his anchor, chosen kin forged in the crucible of roads and oaths. But this vow extended beyond their patch. It reached into the quiet homes of Elm Street, where laughter fought back grief. "We'll shield 'em. Double sentries on the house. Rook, you're on point till noon. No gaps." The plan solidified in murmurs and nods, coffee brewing anew with its bitter steam curling like resolve. By pre-dawn, Knox straddled his bike outside, the engine's low growl vibrating through his bones, headlights piercing the fog-shrouded valley. The ride to Judith's was a blur of dew-kissed fields and the river's silver thread, wind carrying the crisp scent of pine and promise. He arrived as the sun crested, painting the clapboard house in warm hues, the porch swing still as he killed the motor. Judith answered his knock swiftly, her face drawn, a shawl draped over her shoulders against the morning chill. The house behind her hummed with domestic rhythm, clink of dishes from the kitchen, Harper's muffled chatter with her stuffed bear. "Trouble followed you here?" she asked, voice low, eyes scanning the street where mist clung to the lawns. Knox stepped inside, the door clicking shut like a sealed pact. The air inside redolent of oatmeal and fresh linen. "Worse than trouble. Voss knows we're digging. Chased us last night. Got his voice on tape, admitting enough to crack his shell." He pulled the recorder from his vest, setting it on the hall table with a soft thud. Judith's hand trembled as she touched it, the weight of revelation pressing down. From the kitchen, Harper peeked out, her nightgown rumpled, eyes lighting at the sight of him. "The flower man! You brought breakfast." She bounded over, bare feet pattering on the wood, clutching a spoon like a scepter. Knox managed a half-smile, kneeling to her level, the scent of apples from her hair grounding him. "Not today, kid, but I brought a promise. We're making sure the bad guys can't hurt anyone else. Like what happened to your mum?" He glanced up at Judith, who nodded faintly, pulling Harper into a side hug. The girl tilted her head, curiosity undimmed. "With your club? The ones who ride loud?" "Yeah, family rides together." The words carried the club's ethos, loyalty as unbreaking as chrome. Judith led them to the living room, where sunlight filtered through lace, gilding the mantel photos, Dana's vibrant gaze a silent ally. Over tea that steamed in mismatched mugs, Knox outlined the next steps, evidence to the authorities, protection woven like a net. Harper listened wide-eyed, her spoon forgotten, absorbing the gravity with a child's unfiltered trust. As the morning unfolded, Rook arrived discreetly, parking his bike a block away and settling into a shadowed vantage with binoculars and a thermos. Knox lingered, helping Judith fortify the home. Deadbolts checked, a burner phone left on the counter for emergencies. Harper trailed him, chattering about school drawings of motorcycles, her laughter a balm against the encroaching dread. "Will you come back after?" she asked, tugging his sleeve as he prepared to leave. "Every year with the flower, and more if you'll have it." He ruffled her hair, the gesture sealing a new oath, then mounted up, the engine's roar fading into the valley's embrace. Back at the clubhouse, urgency crackled like static. Mira burst through the doors mid-afternoon, files clutched under her arm, the paper edges frayed from hasty retrieval. "It's solid. The vanished witness," pulled her statement. She saw Voss's sedan fleeing the clinic lot right before the chase. Matches the receipt timestamp. The group huddled, the map now alive with fresh pins, the air buzzing with the low hum of a generator powering Mira's laptop. But triumph soured as Hale's radio squawked, urgent, clipped, eyes on Elm, black SUV circled twice. No approach, but they're testing. Knox's blood ran cold, the scar flaring hot. He grabbed his keys, brothers mobilizing in a flurry of leathers and revving motors. The ride back was a thunderous convoy, 5 bikes slicing through traffic, wind whipping like warnings. They arrived to find Judith at the window, Harper coloring at the table, oblivious. Rook signaled all clear from his post, but the air felt charged, shadows lengthening as clouds gathered. Inside, Knox embraced the moment's reprieve, kneeling by Harper. "Draw me one of those bikes sometime, for the road ahead." She beamed, crayons scattering like colorful promises. Outside, Jax posted extra guards, the club's vigilance a living shield. Yet as dusk fell, a call came. Anonymous, Voss's timbre veiled. "Drop the graves. Rourke, or the kid's next bloom wilts." The threat hung, a blade poised, forcing Knox to confront the cost. Redemption demanded more than evidence. It required sacrifice, the chosen family's unbreakable line drawn in the gathering storm. The night deepened, engines idling in wait, justice's roar building toward an inevitable clash. The night cloaked Red Valley in a velvet shroud, broken only by the intermittent glow of street lamps and the steady hum of engines idling like watchful beasts. Knox gripped the burner-phone in his fist, Voss's veiled threat echoing in his mind. The kid's next bloom wilts. A poison arrow aimed at the heart of his resolve. The clubhouse had transformed into a war room, maps unfurled across the table like battle plans, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and heated leather. Jax leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his jaw set like forged steel, while Mira synced the recorder's audio to a secure drive, her fingers steady despite the storm brewing outside. Rain had returned, pattering against the tin roof in a relentless tattoo, mirroring the pulse of urgency thrumming through the Red Valley riders. "We end this tonight," Knox said, his voice cutting through the murmur, low and unyielding as the rumble of thunder in the distance. The scar along his jaw ached, a reminder of old fights, but this one burned deeper, fought not with fists, but with the weight of truth. The evidence pile grew, the receipt, the witness statement, audio clips time-stamped to Voss's empire of shadows. Timer nodded from his corner, polishing a wrench with deliberate strokes, his eyes reflecting the fire's dying embers. "Ride smart, boys. Loyalty's our armor. Truth's the blade." By midnight, the convoy rolled out. 7 bikes in tight formation, headlights piercing the downpour like lances. Knox led, the wind slicing cold against his face, carrying the sharp tang of wet asphalt and pine. They skirted the highways, sticking to back roads where the river flanked them, its waters churning black under the moon. The target, the federal outpost on the county line, a squat brick building where clean hands waited, untainted by Voss's grease. Mira rode shotgun in the club's battered van, files secured in a waterproof case, her resolve a quiet fire in the rear view. Tires hissed on slick pavement as they approached, the outpost's lights a beacon in the gloom. Knox signaled a halt in the shadows of an overpass, engines cutting to whispers. He dismounted, boots splashing in shallow puddles, and approached the gate alone, the rain tracing icy paths down his neck. A guard emerged, flashlight beam cutting the dark, but Knox's club patch and the envelope he extended, sealed with the weight of 8 years, spoke louder than words. "For Agent Hale, unsolved from 15, crash on Route 47, Harlan Voss." The guard's eyes widened, radio crackling to life as Knox retreated, the convoy already melting into the night. Back on the move, relief flickered like a hesitant dawn, but Knox's instincts prickled. Rearview mirrors caught a glint, headlights, too close, aggressive. "Tail!" Jax barked over the comms, his bike surging ahead to flank. The pursuit ignited, Voss's SUV barreling from a side lane, its bulk roaring through the spray. Bullets pinged off chrome, sparks flying like angry fireflies, but the riders weaved as one, chosen kin, unbreakable in motion. Knox gunned it. The engines scream, drowning the storm, leading the beast into a narrow ravine where the river narrowed to a frothing vein. The SUV fishtailed, slamming into a guardrail with a metallic screech that echoed like a death knell. Voss's men bailed, scattering into the underbrush, but the driver, Voss himself, face twisted in the headlights, stumbled out, gun raised. Time slowed, rain blurring the scene into a watercolor of shadows and resolve. Knox skidded to a halt, dismounting in a spray of mud, his own piece steady in gloved hands. "It's over, Harlan. Feds have the tape, the receipt. Your web's unraveling." Voss laughed, a wet, ragged sound lost in the downpour, his suit clinging like a shroud. "You think paper buries me? That nurse was collateral. Roads take what they will." But his eyes darted, the bluster cracking as sirens wailed in the distance, federal response, swift and unyielding. Jacks and Rook closed in, a wall of leather and loyalty, disarming the stragglers without a shot fired. Voss dropped his weapon, hands rising, the fight draining like the river's rush. Cuffs clicked, agents swarming from the tree line, the night's chaos resolving into flashing lights and barked orders. Dawn broke as Knox rode homeward, the sky streaking pink and gold, washing the valley in forgiveness's light. Exhaustion tugged at his limbs, but peace settled deep, a quiet mending of fractures long ignored. The convoy dispersed at the clubhouse, brothers clasping shoulders in silent victory. Timers nod a benediction, mirrors smile a rare bloom. Knox continued alone to Elm Street, the engines purr a lullaby against the morning's hush. Judith waited on the porch, shawl wrapped tight, her face etched with the night's vigil. Harper peeked from the door, bare in arms, eyes bright despite the hour. "Did it work? The bad men gone?" the girl asked, voice tentative as birdsong filled the air. Knox killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the river's distant murmur. He knelt in the dew-kissed grass, the scent of damp earth rising like renewal. "Yeah, kid, Voss is done, the truth's out, your mum's crash reopens today, no more shadows." He pulled a fresh white lily from his saddlebag, its petals pristine, offering it to her. Harper took it, pressing it to her cheek, then hugged him fierce, small arms wrapping his neck. Judith joined them, her hand on Harper's shoulder, eyes meeting Knox's with a gratitude unspoken but profound. "You kept your word, all of you." The rider's protection had held, Rook's watch unbroken, the house a sanctuary through the storm. In that moment, family blurred lines, blood, chosen, woven into one tapestry of honor, weeks blurred into healing rhythms. The inquiry reignited, Voss's empire crumbling under federal scrutiny, shipments seized, associates turning like leaves in the wind. Knox testified in a sterile room, voice steady as he laid bare the night that broke him, the receipt a key unlocking justice's door. Harper attended the quiet ceremony at the cemetery, lily in hand, as Dana's stone gained a new inscription, a life remembered. A legacy redeemed. The Red Valley riders gathered under starlit skies, engines silent for once, sharing stories around the fire. Knox stood taller, the weight lifted, his scar a badge of battles won. Harper visited the clubhouse, drawing bikes on napkins, her laughter echoing through the barn. Judith joined too, tea in hand, her fierce guard softening into alliance. In the end, promises endured, not as burdens but as bridges. Knox rode the highways freer, the white lily a yearly vow renewed. Redemption wasn't erasure, but transformation, guilt to guardianship, silence to strength. The chosen family rode on, engines roaring into sunrises unbroken, honoring the lost with lives rebuilt. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If this story of promises and loyalty touched your soul, please subscribe for more tales of redemption and the unbreakable bonds that light our way.